Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there.
So, this is a quote from Thomas Jefferson. And, the founding fathers were not all in complete agreement, that's for sure. Many had different opposing views on what the government should look like, how big it should be as well. And, we've brought up for many, many times the Council of Nicaea and Christianity, and the same thing was occurring. There were arguments going on at the founding point of what was to become organized Christianity, as Christianity was various things to various people, various groups. In the early beginning, there was tremendously different opinions on who Yeshua, Jesus, was, and exactly what was the biggest points of his message. And it's the same thing with the founding fathers. And here you see what has destroyed liberty and the rights of man in every government which has ever existed under the sun: the generalizing and concentrating all cares and powers into one body. Very, very dangerous. That's why, part of why we have the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. But are they really doing the checks and counterbalances to each other that they were intended? Or is it kind of too late? The end of democracy and the defeat of the American Revolution will occur when government falls into the hands of lending institutions and moneyed corporations. Thomas Jefferson, 1816. Boy, that was prophetic, was it not? It certainly was. And there's some presidents we could look to and point the finger at more than others. Perhaps look to Woodrow Wilson, and many would say he was an outright socialist heading towards communist. And then there were many that loved him as well. And then we also know, again, that the puppet masters are the ones manipulating the strings, as we've heard that quote many, many times. I was going to put it up again, but I won't put it up again just because you guys will probably get sick of it. But there was a certain Red Shield family member, ROTHS child, that said he doesn't care who's on the throne, or perhaps who's in the presidency, because if you control the money situation, you control the power. And this is exactly what Thomas Jefferson was talking about. And these men were not perfect. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and all that, and yet more than half of them had slaves. And so how hypocritical was that at the same time? But this is an imperfect world by a mile, that's for sure. There's nothing, I don't think it's supposed to be perfect, because we all have different views and opinions. One size never fits all.
No, never. And, looking back then and looking now, the hypocrisy, that's one thing that doesn't seem to change, where a lot of other things do.
It seems to me that the hypocrisy gets worse and worse. And it's just like watching a WWE match, where, each side is calling the other the bad guy. And, they could switch the hats anytime they want. Again, it's in so many ways an illusion, but there is a reality at the same time that many people feel very strongly about one thing, and you'll have people on the other side that feel very strongly about the exact opposite. And here you see New York State's going to mandate all state employees to get the big V or to get tested regularly. And this is Andrew Cuomo, the governor of that state. And here we see parents from California actually filed a lawsuit against the GOV, Mr. Newsom, and state health officials over a certain mandate. And people really need to look deep, deep, deep into these things. Look very deep. So you see California and New York are on one side of the fence, and here we have Governor Abbott over in Texas making a statement to the opposite side of the fence, talking about personal, individual right to make your own decisions. And also over here you see a few other GOP governors, including McMaster's of South Carolina, voiced their opposition to new CDC requirements, as they show a picture of the governor of Florida, And again, we not only have to listen to every word that is spoken, we have to, I feel it's our right and our duty to actually go look it up. And if there's 1,130 pages and you're in that state, you might want to glance through every single page. Here you have Governor Kristi Noem saying this particular agency shifts their position again. This is South Dakota. So again, she's more in line with Texas and apparently Florida. And using every word very carefully. So we have the Texas governor ordering the National Guard to
Texas
arrest
Governor Greg Abbott on Tuesday.
As again, what we have seen is that the Texas governor and the Texas leadership don't feel enough is being done at the southern border since we've had the change in January, and taking more things into their own hands. So, what's all that showing us? It's showing us that the Great Divide is here and it's in progress, and it appears to be unstoppable. I can't imagine how this house of cards can stay together. Can you?
No, I really can't. I mean, I'm waiting for a precipice, and just when it seems like things are ready to explode, it's like, well, something more happens, which, can make things even more explosive. So there is a point where the straw is going to break the camel's back. It feels like we're there, but it's just got a little bit further to go. But there's definitely no going back.
Yeah, exactly. And there were more things as well. As we know, there's some FED dates that have been done for some employees, that again fly in the face of what certain governors are saying. So, to me, this all looks like an inevitable divorce that's coming. It's just whether it's going to be amicable and civil or not. And I would tend to guess it's going to probably be or not, knowing the history and the powers that be behind the scenes. U.S. Air Force says it's intercepting more Russian jets near Alaska than ever. This has gone up too. These things go hand in hand, and this is how I've gotten that picture going back to 1984 in visions, in dreams. And, one of the things that I've shared with you guys in the past is I would keep, and right now there's a dream journal right next to the bed. So when I wake up with something significant, I write it down. I just write it down. And I had brought up in the past how I saw in a dream basically two planes going into big buildings that I recognized immediately because I had been in them, and the windows were so unique in structure. And I had forgotten that dream. And back in 2006, I was going through old dream journals just to see, what had transpired similar to some of the dreams I had had and some of the visions. And then I saw an entry for September 11th, 2000, and it was that dream that saw two planes going into the two towers. And so I asked Cindy yesterday, I said, do you know which one of the guides it was that let me know that? And
That was the Galactic Federation, but it was somebody that's quite high up. It's very, very difficult to get dates. We got to start with that. Somehow, some way, they were actually able to get this timeline right. That's really rare.
Yeah, so that was actually apparently it was our regular contacts
higher up
that had sent that to me, and I didn't remember it at all. It wasn't until like 6 years later that I went and looked and saw that and said, holy crap, but then we can do those things. We do have the ability to do those things when we're actively working on our higher self and connecting to the higher self. It's a matter of practice. It's like exercise. Or it's like, shooting a basketball. You're not going to shoot like LeBron James or, from my era, Michael Jordan, just by picking up the ball up for the first time and taking a shot. Might get lucky. but it takes practice. The same thing with exercising these abilities. It takes practice. And I would hope everybody is working on that now. 2 trillion in Chinese Wall Street listings could be swept away amid growing PRC U.S. regulatory pressure. Chinese companies began a careful foray into the U.S. stock market in the early 2000s, tantalized by the prospects of picking easy cash from American investors eager to invest in the world's new economic powerhouse. 2 loopholes which have enabled Chinese companies to thrive on Wall Street may be closed soon, threatening to deprive U.S. markets of much of the 2+ trillion in market capitalization accrued by the nearly 250 Chinese firms listed on the U.S. stock exchanges. So it's really interesting to see what's been going on behind the scenes for a while. I think the masses haven't realized exactly how big the expansionism, the shift of power has really been. And now it's like we're looking in hindsight because the 2 trains are just heading straight to each other. And apparently they're on the same track that's going to collide at some point in time. And now we're looking back almost and saying, wow, look what was happening the whole time here. Many people anyway. Others saw this the whole time.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff.
And by the way, coincidentally, 5 Cuban generals mysteriously died. You know, what caused it? We don't know. People might speculate. They were older, but, you know, they were older, 79. You know, that's a fairly decent long life for a male. And some were in their 80s, but one of them was just going to turn 58 as well. Isn't it curious? You know, 5 of them have all died recently. You know, and speaking about losses, just want to touch on this. So Dusty Hill, the bassist for ZZ Top, has passed at 72 years of age, famous for the beard. It's interesting that the drummer's name was Beard, Frank Beard, and he was the only one without a beard. And Joey Jordison, much younger, 46, co-founder of Slipknot and drummer of Slipknot, died at 46. Just wanted to make mention of that to you guys, for you that have followed those 2 bands perhaps for a while. And of course, we send condolences to the family and our best wishes. The Corn Belt is at risk for damaging derecho storms. These are storms that could bring like inline winds up to maybe 100-mile-an-hour hurricane-force winds, tornadoes, torrential rains, flash floods. Wisconsin, you are in the bullseye. So be aware of this tonight. And by the way, you know, this is again the Corn Belt. It's going to move basically southeast. So it's going to head through Michigan and into parts of Illinois and Indiana, and then on into Ohio and Pennsylvania. The Corn Belt. Boy, we're getting closer to harvest time, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
You know, it's amazing. A little all too perfect what's happening, this perfect storm. And by the way, in Kazakhstan, this is a drought nobody's talking about. Could be a harbinger of doom for the region and the West. You know, the world is plagued by this global pandemic, but some of the things that we're missing is what's happening in some of the more diverse parts of the world. And over in Kazakhstan, the government put a 6-month ban on exporting food, such as for livestock, and making sure produce stays at home. Well, that's a big statement. And, you know, this makes me think right away of Adapt 2030 and David, because he said you're going to be seeing this. You're going to start seeing these countries are going to say, oh, no, we're not exporting nothing. Nothing. And then maybe it could even break down to the point where certain states will be saying, you know, we need to hang on to our produce. What if, you know, California has a fallout, for instance, with Texas and Florida and the other redder states? California decides, you know, we're just going to keep the produce for ourselves instead of exporting it. And people will be like, obviously, there's a federal government that's going to get involved. But then again, this is part of perhaps the bigger divorce picture that's going to be happening underway. complicated out there. There's lots going on, guys. And over here, red tide is gripping Tampa Bay, so shrimpers are turning their nets towards death. Ooh, that sounds yucky.
Yikes. Yeah.
Well, I don't really want to take any shrimp out of this area.
No.
It looks just so horrible. So Tolliver and Jessica Tucker are used to dark, oily water, the bulging eyes, the gray flesh decaying to a pulp in the city's bayous.
Ew.
That's really pretty nasty. They've even become accustomed to the smell, the smell of all the rotting fish and gruesome flotillas, victims of the toxic red tide in Tampa Bay. But the maggots are new, white and regular. This is gross, guys.
Oh, man. Wow.
In the scales of rotting sheep's head, they climb seawalls at water's edge. My God, what a picture they are painting.
Yeah.
It feels like they're talking about, that pale horseman that we've heard so much about. It's sad. It's devastating. The canals are sick. It's devastating. Thought about crying as you see what they're picking up with their nets. Hopefully none of that makes it to anybody's tables.
Right.
You got to think about where you're sourcing your food from, as we've talked about. And Cindy and I eat almost all vegetarian. Occasionally, maybe twice a month, we will have either some fish or some shrimp. I always look at the bags, and I don't buy any shrimp that's coming out of the Pacific. Not to say that the Gulf is not filthy as well. And as we can see, the water's off of Florida here. Beware of the farming techniques. When you see say tilapia that comes from farms, it could be just atrocious. And again, the stuff that comes out of Southeast Asia, China, I will never buy. For one, because they always are loaded with preservatives. And those preservatives are inflammatory for the most part and can cause a lot of issues. Inflammation leads to dis-ease. And, if something can preserve things for a long period of time, you got to wonder what it's going to do again to the organs and to the bodies. And I've lived through this firsthand, as I was basically half a mile from the beach and could smell the death and decay every single day. And as soon as I'd open the door to go walk Zeke, it would be just like a smack in the face that actually was burning the nostrils and even kind of going down and burning the lungs. And this is really why I left Florida, because I felt like this would be reoccurring. And I got the message from the guides that it's not going to be the healthiest of situations, because if they're going to keep, the conditions are not going to change, is basically, what we got. So I was lucky enough to, when I was in Florida, be able to get off of get away from the place I was staying, which was half a mile from the beach, and go about 20 miles inland where it wasn't so bothersome. But this is just so sad to see all this death in such a beautiful place, beautiful state. I will say that was one of my favorite states to live in. But this world is toxic, and it's really, again, it's a byproduct of the system that's in place, which has absolutely no respect for nature, Mother Earth. They probably even hate that term. So many people are brought up to even hate that term. Mm-hmm. Just saying something like Gaia, giving a personal name to the planet, because of religious indoctrination, will make a lot of people feel edgy, itchy, or sick.
Well, yeah, there's been times when I commented maybe on YouTube about something about helping Mother Earth, and people have turned around and attacked me for talking about New Age BS, and that's really hurtful. And I know these people somewhere in their heart, it's just conditioning, but it's sad to see that.
It is conditioning, and it's actually buying into the system. It's buying into the matrix, and I know that rub some people the wrong way, but you are, because who's given you this? This has been given to you by the church, which ultimately is coming out of a Constantinian mindset. Whether you're looking at a Bible that comes out of a Baptist church, any sort of Protestant church, Catholic church, it doesn't matter, because it really, there's some of them have pseudepigrapha in them, some don't. There's different versions, Wycliffe, there's the King James, the New King James. King James, by the way, a 33rd degree Mason insider. Why would you ever trust anything that comes from a King James in the first place, the head of all the Masonic lodges? It's time to wake up, people, because we have our pet, there's little pet parts of the matrix that for so many people are so hard to let go of. And again, it's just the conditioning. It's what's been drilled into your head. It's and given to you by people that you love. As Buddha had said, don't trust something because I tell you. Don't trust it because your parents told you, government officials told you, your priests, your pastors, wise men. You have to judge with head and heart only after you have all the info. And in many cases, they'll refuse to look at the info. We talked about China and the USA being on a collision course. They are. It's obvious. And they've been set on that collision course. Another, collision course is basically going to be Islam and Christianity. They're set up that way so that they're on a collision course. Suffer not an infidel to live, right? Islam itself means submit. Submit to what? The will of God. The will of God, how do you know? Well, it's given to us by the Prophet Muhammad. Well, do you know Muhammad? Were you there? Have you read it from start to finish? Does it jive with heart and head? And I have read the Quran, and for me, it didn't jive. And that's just sharing you the truth. And I have read the Bible start to finish countless times. And for me, the story that they give us doesn't make any sense as far as the official explanation. Can I find nuggets in any of the scriptures out there? Sure. Yeah, there are universal truths that are out there. That are universal truths. And the greatest universal truth is acting and being in a heart-centered place, one that has compassion and love at the forefront. Old do unto others, right? It's so simple. It's not about dogma. Dogma divides, love brings together. Compassion, love, forgiveness, not dogma. Dogma is exactly how they keep us separated. As we see a strong eruption at Sinabung volcano, ash up to 23,000 feet in Indonesia. This one does go off on a fairly regular basis. And Stromboli as well, another strong eruption. So yes, the volcanoes are ongoing. And we have a record-breaking heat wave that hits Hokkaido. Hokkaido is the northernmost bigger island in Japan. And Hokkaido is interesting too because the Ainu were there, and that's an interesting thing in itself. Because the Ainu were most definitely a little different than many other subsets of humanity, and very curious where they really came from. And many of you guys have followed Robert Seffer, Atlantean Gardens. He does a good job. There's so many others out there that do good jobs with doing the research and showing that what we're taught in school, it's obviously not the history that has really gone down. We could tell too just from genetics and DNA. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more complicated than what they give us. And here we see another meteor or something. A fireball lights up the sky in Western Australia. Look at that. That's pretty.
That's beautiful. I just love how they always call it, oh, it's just a fireball all the time. Every single one, just a fireball.
Right. And why fishing gear is out of stock? What? Fishing gear too? Well, think about it. Think about it. And we were talking to one of our family members yesterday, and I was absolutely so impressed with how prepared Miss Tammy is.
Oh, yes. Good job, Miss Tammy.
Tammy, you are impressive.
Yes,
just
you are.
Impressive. For one, she's growing leaps and bounds spiritually. She's got herself super organized, doing a great practice. She's got every base covered, including her fishing gear.
Yes.
Think about it too, because how are we going to feed our families? And part of the reason why we are occasionally eating fish is, well, in some fish, they have really good essential fatty acids. as well as a good source of protein that's easy to digest, but also the fact that where we have situated ourselves, we're by tons of rivers, lakes, and streams. So what is naturally abundant in the area that we're at? Fish. So if we have enough lentils and rice to last us 2-3 years, or maybe a hair more, we could always supplement that by growing ourselves, things like peppers and onions and garlic and fishing, and getting a good, well-balanced diet in even the most dire of search situations, as long as they allow us to leave our house. I'm not sure if they're going to be checking you when you're out at a local stream or a lake somewhere. If it's going to get to be that extreme that you can't actually even leave your house under certain situations, let's hope that is not the case. So, as always, guys, we got to be prepared and think about every possible angle. What can we do to support ourselves, to support each other, moving forward? Keep putting out the positive intents. Sometimes you could have a breakup, and that breakup might be a little bit painful, but then later on, you become the best of friends.
Yep, it turns into quite a blessing.
It could be. So thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. Make sure you guys are subscribed to both channels with the little, what do we call those things? A little star? Is it a star that you click? It's the bell. It's the bell. I forgot the bell.
The bell, kids.
Click
the
bell.
Thank you.
Check out medicinal foods. There's lots of great stuff out there that'll help boost the immune system and be good for the taste buds as well. And if you need to set up an appointment, it's evolutionaryenergyarts@gmail.com or EEARTS@protonmail.com. And thanks for your patience with us getting you in as well. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.